Over 10 years ago, in elementary school, I remember sitting at the lunch table with my classmates and overheard one of them mention something they saw on YouTube. I perked up, because I had recently discovered the site. As a kid in 4th grade, I watched the usual, mostly Minecraft videos and Smosh. But this wasn't what my classmate was talking about. He called it the Slender Man. Horror is one of my favorite genres of all time, and it all started with my classmates telling me about the Slender Man. All he told me was to look it up on YouTube. So after I got off the bus, I went straight to the family iPad before my parents got home, and did as I was told. I don't remember the exact video I ended up watching. I don't remember what happened after I finished watching the video. All I remember is that for an entire year after that incident, I slept facing away from the closet. And after 9 months of being haunted by this figure, I decided that the only way to face my fears was to confront it. So that's what I did. I forced myself to watch more videos. By the time I was getting over my fear, the beginnings of another horror icon began to sprout and spread on YouTube in August of 2014. And that was the release of Five Nights at Freddy's. I watched multiple Let's Plays and always hid in the comments section whenever the timestamps warned me of an oncoming jump scare. But FNAF never shook me the way Slender did. It didn't keep me up at night worrying about a monster of horrific origins breaking down my bedroom door to terrify me. It was scary when I watched the videos, and only then. Since Slender, I have yet to watch something or see something that has kept me awake at night. Something that makes my palms sweat and my heart race when I need to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. And I've seen plenty of fucked up shit, okay? I've seen both Terrifier films. The most recent occurrence of this I can remember was after I watched the first volume of the Mandela Catalog by Alex Kister. The imagery and text-to-speech and the use of the found footage genre created emotions that led to one sleepless night. But after a few days, I got over it. I rewatched the video, saw a couple of people's theories online, and I got over it. Fast forward to January 14th, 2023. I've just gotten out of a film that's had an extremely limited release in theaters. It's being praised for its experimental approach to horror. It was made on a shoestring budget of just $15,000 Canadian, and it's one of the most effective horror films that I've seen in my entire life. That film is Skinamarink. Skinamarink was directed by Kyle Edward Ball and is his feature film debut, although he's been grinding in the horror sphere for a while now under the name of Bite-Sized Nightmares. The film is based on a proof of concept by Ball called Heck, which was released back in July 2020, which I highly encourage you to check out after this video. When I first walked out of the film, I thought it was a neat little horror flick that was trying something unique, and I appreciated it for what it was. It had some solid spooks, and if you had asked me my thoughts immediately after getting out of the theater, I would have given it like a 7 out of 10. But if you would have asked me my thoughts 1 hour later, 2 hours later, 4 hours later, they would have all been very different responses. I had a hard time convincing myself to go to bed that night. What makes Skinamarink so damn effective, and all horror for that matter, is its ambiguity. The film makes decisions that other films would look down on as amateur. Most of the movie are low-angle still shots of the floor, walls, and empty hallways. Almost none of the actors are ever in focus, and you never see their faces. Nearly none of the dialogue is easily understood, and it's made even more confusing by what the film decides is worth subtitling. Any other film would look at these decisions as an incoherent mess, but Ball knows what he is doing. It's not about when you're watching the film. It's about after the credits roll. Let's take a look at another great horror film that recently released for comparison. 2022 was an excellent year for horror fans, but for the sake of comparison, I chose Zach Cregger's Barbarian, which I consider to be the best horror film of the year. Barbarian is a thrill from beginning to end, and some of the fun came from the lack of marketing the film received. The main selling point was, it's scary, go fucking see it. Its trailer was left intentionally obscure so that audiences could go into the film without any sort of expectations other than it was a horror movie. So, audiences went to the theaters and supported the film. I went, I watched it, had a hell of a good time, and that was that. I recommended it to friends I saw who might not have seen it otherwise, and moved on. The thing about Barbarian is that while its marketing was obscure, the film pretty much explains everything that happens, which is not a bad thing. I don't want people to get that impression. But going back to Skinamarink, that film explains nothing. Similarly to Barbarian, the film's marketing is very cryptic, almost non-existent. Viewers of the trailer were left with only questions, no answers. However, after I left the theater, I was still left with plenty of questions. In fact, I don't think the film answered any of my questions. And the more I thought about it, the more that unnerved me. The feeling of uneasiness began to grow and fester. The film tapped into the abuse of my imagination, as Slender did when I was a child. The film does this with its cinematography, which is extremely bare bones. Although the film was shot digitally, the grain effects added in post-production begin to remove information from the scene. Suddenly, an empty, dark hallway just becomes a dark hallway, and then eventually, just darkness. In a crowded theater, a shot of grainy blackness doesn't have the same effect as it does if you were in your home by yourself. These are the shots I brought home with me after I saw Skinamarink. These are the images I couldn't stop thinking of when I was turning my lights off for the night. These are the sounds I couldn't get out of my head when I was locking the door. The inconclusiveness of the plot, the character safety, and the mumbled dialogue all culminates into an experience that I took for granted when I saw the end appear on the screen, because I had seen the film in the safest environment possible, surrounded by over a few dozen people. I didn't fully appreciate the film until I laid in bed with the inability to close my eyes. As I mentioned earlier, the Mandela Catalog was one of the few pieces of horror in the last few years that brought me an overwhelming sense of dread after I finished it. But as the series continued, with the most recent edition being Volume 3, the series has begun to make more ambitious choices in its storytelling, which has caused a shift from the roots of the eerie found footage style to becoming more live action, which is totally fine. Alex has a story he wants to tell, and the series will eventually need a conclusion, leaving fans with answers they've had since the very first upload. But because of the choices to diverge from what made the first so successful, none of the following entries into the series left the same impact on me as those first few videos did, which is why Skinamarink needs to succeed. It is proof that not answering a single question for your audience can be even more impactful than a movie loaded to the brim with jump scares and intricate monster designs, elaborate plots, and empathetic characters. Each viewer gets to decide what monster is lurking in the shadows. Each viewer decides what that thunk sound was and where it's coming from. Right now, the film is indecisive amongst audience members, and that's not too surprising. For most, it'll be an hour and 40 minutes of nothing interesting happening. But I truly hope that as audiences return to their homes and settle in for the night, they'll begin to understand the true horror of Skinamarink. There is always something lurking around the corner. You just can't see it. So the question is, what is it? Because Skinamarink is not a film that answers that question for you in its 100-minute runtime. It's a film that's designed to linger.